On this episode of Textbook, we're talking with Aaron Ochoa, who serves as the Director of Course Materials and Finance at UC Davis Stores at the University of California, Davis. Aaron leads strategy around course materials, affordability, and financial operations, and he brings more than 2 decades of experience in the college bookstore space to that work. He specializes in developing and implementing affordable course material programs, including inclusive access and equitable access programs, aligning the bookstore with broader institutional goals around student success. His approach is rooted in strong campus partnerships, thoughtful change management, and a people-first leadership philosophy. Aaron holds a bachelor's degree in business administration with a focus on accounting and management from the University of Nevada, Reno, and he's currently pursuing accreditation as an International Coaching Federation certified coach. As always, the views shared here are those of the host and our guest, and not necessarily those of any current or former employer. Let's get into it with Aaron.
Dr. Andy, it's so good to see you. You know who we have here with us today? I
think we
will
kind
never
of
use this word. I will never use this word ever again, but I'm kind of fanboying right now. Aaron Ochoa from UC Davis Stores is joining us today. And when we talk about titans in the industry and we talk about legends, Aaron is part of the legendary team at UC Davis who has completely transformed the way that we think about course materials. Aaron and his team have completely reimagined what it means to be of service and to deliver for students. I'm so honored and privileged to have you on the show today, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. I am very excited to be here. And thank you for the kind words. Fanboying. I don't think I've ever had anybody say that to me. So I'm going to blush a little bit.
I'll never use it again because I hate that word. When we think about how this industry has changed, course materials industry has changed over the last decade or more, you guys have been on the forefront of that. For folks who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit how you found your way into the campus bookstore world?
Absolutely. And really, I think it's how many of us did, at least, when I kind of started. I was a student employee in my own campus bookstore. So my sophomore year, I moved out of the dorms, had to start paying rent, had to figure out what to do. One of my roommates happened to work at the bookstore as well and said, "Hey, you know what? We have a position. Do you want to come apply?" So I said, "Sure." So as a student, I worked in the technology space. I sold computers, and at the time, the assistant manager was moving into the manager role. She was a textbook manager, but moving into kind of the director space. And she reached out to a handful of us that were all kind of graduating at the same time and said, "Hey, we have some folks who are going to be moving around. We have some folks who are going to be retiring. Are you interested in staying on full time?" As a brand new graduate, I thought, well, hell, now I don't have to think about finding a job. I could just stay here. She's like, "Yeah, take Friday off as your break in service and we'll start paperwork on Monday." I said, "Absolutely." So I started, and again, I moved from the technology space into the course material space. I was a clerk for a couple of years, and through just situations that have happened, I kind of moved my way up from clerk to buyer to manager to then supervisor and associate director. Realistically, I feel like, in hindsight, I look back at that and think that process happened way too quickly. I moved into some of those roles very green and probably should not have been there, but that's how we learn. And so ultimately, the position at Davis opened up, and applied for that. I got that position and I moved over, and that was about 8 years ago now.
So if you didn't go into bookstores, what were you looking at doing when you came out of college?
Culinary arts. I love to cook 100%. And if I ever win the lottery and I never have to work for money, taco truck, here I come.
Taco's your specialty? Is that your main dish? Is that what you make the best?
I am Hispanic. I am Mexican, and I learned to cook Mexican foods. I like to dabble in other things. My wife is Dutch and Polish, so our palates are very different historically. But I've learned to take some of those meals that she grew up with and kind of alter them. I do about 80% of the cooking at our house, which is good because I can't clean very well. So she handles that part and I handle the cooking part. So it all works out. But yeah, I have a couple of passions, but when it comes to creativity, that's where I seem to find it.
So I'm hearing Polish, Mexican fusion.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. A lot of potatoes with salsa on it. We'll figure it out.
So it's very interesting. What since you have that passion for cooking or you have all these other interests, what's kept you in this industry? What's kept you coming to work every single day?
I hear those as two separate questions, and let me start with maybe the second part of it, which is like what keeps me coming to work every day, and that too has changed. Right? When I was younger, was wanting to have my own store, wanting to be the person in charge. It was almost kind of like I want to grow to be that person, that status piece that I see or that I respected. That all changed when we had my daughter. So when my daughter was born, it kind of hit me. A couple of different things hit me. I started thinking more along the lines of the students that I have in my store now will eventually be the leaders, the doctors, the lawyers, the police officers, the politicians, the whatevers of the world that my daughter lives in. I can't do everything. But if I can help them be better people and do better things, then I did my job as a dad. I made the world better for my little girl. And that's what's important. That's what's important to me now. The other piece that kind of rolls around with that is it reminds me. And so my daughter's name is Izzy, by the way. So as we talk, I might say, "Oh, Izzy," and that's Izzy, and that's my daughter. My wife's name is Katie. So again, as we talk, that's what you can hear. But I recognized something else, and I actually had this conversation with a colleague at the ICBA conference just recently. I have to remind myself that every single student that walks through my door, whether that be a customer, whether that be an employee, um, is somebody else's Izzy. And so I have to be conscious of that. And I have to make sure that how I would want her treated when she goes to school is how I need to make sure that I treat my people. So that's like the big piece of that puzzle, right? That's well, why do I do what I do? Because I need to be a good dad, and this is how I can be a good dad. The more like piece of the puzzle of like, oh, why do I find it interesting, or why do I find it fun, or why do I find is more along the lines of so many different types of people, so many different types of problems, and so many pieces. It's almost like this huge puzzle. How can I fit them all together? How can I take a problem that's happening in dining and figure out a way that the store can support that? How can we take a problem that's happening in, I don't know, maybe it's accessibility, or maybe it is sustainability, and how can we be a part of that solution? A university is a very big and complex thing to work in, and you've got a lot of personalities to work with. You've got a lot of just different things happening. And so as I've kind of gone up in my career, I've recognized it's less and less about running a store. I mean, yes, the associate director level and below, absolutely, that is their role. Once we hit into the director level, it's not all about that. It's about working with people. It's about figuring out how to find solutions. It's figuring out how to navigate the political landscape that may be happening on your particular campus. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. Sometimes it's just, here's the problem. How do we fix it? And kind of working through that process. I like being able to try to look out of the box. The team has been very, very good at figuring out solutions that did not exist, as you've kind of alluded to earlier. And so that's what makes it fun, right? That's what gives me kind of the excitement. And then ultimately, it's the people that you work with. You enjoy the people you work with. I enjoy spending time with my student employees. I enjoy going down to the store, wandering the store, chit-chatting with them. It's always funny. The students will ask me, they're like, "Aaron, what exactly do you do?" And I tell them all the time, I go, "Have you actually ever seen me do anything?" And they kind of look at me and they're like, "Well, no." I'm like, "Okay." But, obviously through conversations, we talk more about, well, what is our roles? What are the things we do? They do see some of those pieces, but really it's hearing about them. What's going on in their lives. Did they get a new dog? Are they moving into a new house? Are they really struggling in a course, or are they struggling with a professor? Just hearing what's happening there. I have to, again, going back to the thing about Izzy, I have to remember that these students are away from home, and I'm a structured adult who happens to be in front of them. I mean,
Right.
maybe I'm a structured older person who is in front of them. So I'm not saying we take the responsibility of the parent, but we become that role for a moment.
Right.
And just kind of keeping that in mind.
And I really connected with what you said there, because, over the 15 years of being an operator, I really never woke up once and think, oh, I just work at a bookstore. There's so much more in what you do on a daily basis when you're an operator. It's not one thing. You don't have the opportunity just to to stock books or to order books or hang t-shirts. Becoming part of the fabric of campus and really understanding that you are touching a lot of lives in different ways. And sometimes you'll never understand or you'll never know in which way that you have changed someone or given someone an opportunity, whether it's your employees, it's a student, it's someone on campus. I love your perspective. It's much deeper than just waking up and being a retailer. That's not solely, that's part of who we are and what we do within the four walls, but we can make an impact in a much greater way. We have an opportunity to make an impact in a much greater way. So I love the way that you phrase that.
I think being on a college campus just opens us up to having these amazing opportunities because really it's just an environment where people want to learn, they're growing. And, it's just amazing some of the opportunities you get through campus service jobs or university jobs that you may not get someplace else. Barnes and Nobles, you may not have that same interaction with students. And I think that really makes our industry special.
Absolutely. And I mean, and I can tell you, I also gain benefit from that too, right? I I can admit that I feel youthful because I get to work with youth. I mean, that is part of this. Are they non-traditional students? Of course. And are they just as important? Of course. But there is something to be said about continuously engaging with these 18 to 20, 22, 24-year olds who, to your point, Andy, are here to learn. They're here to have this part of their life that is, most of us would probably look back and say, well, that was probably the best time of my life. I had things that I thought I was stressed about, but it wasn't the same as what we may stress about as we can become adults. We had responsibilities, but again, not the same kind of responsibilities once we get a little bit older, but you're adult enough to go and make your own choices and do things. And so I really enjoy, again, that kind of interaction with our student body.
And on the heels of that, and talking about some of these opportunities and the impact we can make, we really can't have a conversation with a legendary member of the UC Davis store team without acknowledging you being the OGs and pioneers of equitable access. And we don't need to walk through that. I know that you guys have told the stories millions of times, but that work has kind of really led you to some other cool things or innovation discoveries at the UC Davis stores. And I know you kind of have a vision for like what's next or that next thing. So can you talk to us a little bit about what the next thing is coming out of the UC Davis stores or out of your team?
Sure, absolutely. You talk about the stories there too. And I'll reiterate what we call our Carlos story because I think it's extremely important to kind of lead into this space. And so for those out there listening that have never heard this story, this is part of kind of the equitable access piece or why we moved into this space or why this space is so important. And ultimately what it comes down to is when we were presenting the idea to the upper leadership of campus, we had an employee of ours who told his particular story. And again, we call it his Carlos story. He came in as the type of student that we always are looking to add a little extra support, right? He came from a low income family, came from a single parent family home, was a first generation student. So all the things that we hear and we think, okay, yes, this student is here, they should be here, they belong here. And, let's make sure that we can support them in doing so. So he told the story of, he was moving to the dorm. So it was move-in day. Got here. He came in with his mom. They were so excited that he'd gotten into a UC and they were doing everything that they should, moved into the dorms, everything else is going on. After they did that, she gave him a big old hug and was like, I'm so proud of you. I saved up as much money as I could over this last year so you can go buy your books. I know that they're expensive. And so again, they said their goodbyes. He took his envelope and came down to the bookstore. So Carlo's goal was to be an aerospace engineer. And so he came down to the store, went downstairs, which is where we had our textbooks at the time, and started looking around for his engineering books. And so he found them. So he starts walking down the aisle, sees his books, opens up his envelope, reaches in, pulls out $100 bill, looks up at his first book. It's $230. All the money his mom saved over a year wouldn't buy him one book. So he didn't know what to do. He started wandering the aisles, looking around. What could he afford? He came across political science. Didn't know anything about it, but he could afford the books that were for those intro-level courses. So Carlo changed his major to political science, got a job at the bookstore, which we're very happy for that he did. He's moved on to bigger and better things now. But the real thing is this. Carlo graduated from UC Davis with a degree in political science, not aerospace engineering. No one should have to make a decision on what their life is going to be because they can't afford a textbook. That's
Powerful.
me telling you that story. Imagine if he told you that story.
I mean, I already want to like tear up, so I would absolutely not be able to survive hearing that story directly from him. And honestly, that story is so familiar for so many students. It's, I mean, you know, I've been on the front lines and I've been there holding the hand of the parent and the student crying, trying to figure out how they're going to buy their course materials, eat or pay rent or pay childcare. Like that story is so pervasive throughout higher education because for 150 years we've said, well, textbooks are required. You need your textbook. Good luck. There's never been anyone or anything that has really systematically, or there's no one that's ever really tried to change the entire system. We can introduce bits and pieces. We can introduce different formats, whether it's an OER, whether it's a loose leaf textbook or whatever. We can try to drive in the cost, but nothing has fundamentally changed the acquisition delivery of course materials like access programs as we know them today.
So again, that's just kind of to set the stage for why we have these types of programs or why we move forward with these types of programs and why they're important. And so what do we kind of see coming out of that now, or what are we working on now is actually something we find very interesting. It's going to be a difficult journey but an exciting journey. And ultimately, our goal is this. We have so much more data now on student engagement, how much time students spending in these digital platforms, what kind of work they're doing that we never had before. And so this kind of goes back to how we think of things is the goal at this point is to try to say, with all this data, could we figure out a way to have an early warning system that we can provide that will give, and again, the question is somebody, this kind of information to say, hey, student X may not be doing as well as they should, or, they're not keeping pace with their classmates. Maybe they need another touch point, and maybe it's not even an academic touch point. Maybe it's just, are things okay? Is your home life okay? Are you getting enough sleep? Can you pay your rent? Is that what you're stressed about in not doing well in school? Just sometimes another touch point. So for some context, we as the stores actually report to student affairs, which is not always the case. Many times independent stores will report up through the financial side of the house, up through auxiliaries. But in our case, we live in student affairs. So our mindset's not a little bit different, but at least we have folks in which we can work with that can kind of help us there. So that's, that was the goal. That was like, okay, well, what does this early warning system look like? And then part of it is, well, who do we give it to? I am not trained. My bosses aren't trained to do this. We don't know, but we know that there's something there. And so how can we kind of start working through that process? So we have an assistant vice chancellor whose whole role is innovation and student success. That is her title. And so we kind of went to her and said, hey, here's this stuff. Well, again, we don't know what to do with it per se, but here it is. What do you think we can do? Or is this something we should do? Because there's always those questions. And she was so excited. I mean, she was so excited to the point that she was like, for years and years, we've talked about being able to support students before things go wrong. And we've done nothing about it. We didn't know what to do. Now we actually might be able to do something about this. So that's kind of the new piece of the puzzle now. It's like, okay, well, how do we take this data? And as we work through this, it's going to be one problem and then another problem and then another problem. And so the whole point is let's solve it piece by piece. Like you look at the grand thing, go, okay, we're just gonna call it early warning system. That's the concept. We don't have it all figured out. We're going to figure it out piece by piece as we go, because every time we figure out one piece, there's going to be something else that goes, oh yeah, you know what? We didn't think about that. So let's try to figure that piece out. And oh, yep, you know what? We should probably bring in that person from wherever and see what their points of view are on this. And then, obviously that allows us to get there, but there's steps, right? We're making steps in the right direction. So what could that ultimately look like? To be honest with you, I don't know, but I don't have to know. All I know is that we have folks that are excited about this, are figuring out pieces that we need to do. What are the next sets of pieces? So like right now, the next kind of conversation that we're having is, okay, now that we have the data and now that we've kind of collated down to some things, how do we get the different data from the different publishers in the same format so that we're looking apples to apples when we're doing these things? But really kind of the next step is like, well, but how do we know what's important? Like we need to get some KPIs. Again, now, whether this is from a faculty member specifically, whether that is from the tutoring folks, whether, some sort of KPIs that we can put into a dashboard or whatever it may look like to then be able to do the analysis itself. Because how do I know if Mike might be the smartest guy in the class, and that's why he only opened his book for 5 seconds and he still has an A. So let's not bother Mike. Aaron, on the other hand, maybe, not doing so well and keeping, opening his book for 3 hours, 3 hours every evening and still struggling. Okay. So we have to be able to figure out what it's not time in book, because that obviously is not the case. It's
Right.
something else. So figuring out what those kind of KPIs would be is going to be actually a little difficult, because obviously it's going to be different for every class and it's going to be different for every instructor. And so again, kind of working through what that is.
Right.
Is it going to be something that we do for all classes, or is it going to be something that we do specifically for those courses in which we know students struggle in? Every university has those set of courses. If you go to any university and you ask their tutoring center, do you tutor everything? Most of them are going to say, no, we tutor chemistry, calculus, intro bio, intro physics, and then some maybe random other thing, intro psychology, because those are the ones that students struggle in the most. So maybe that's our focus. Again, I don't know. We kind of make it up as we go, but no, we work through that process and try to figure those pieces out as we go.
And that's not the bookstore lane, right? Like that's so far outside of that. And I think that ties into something that Andy was going to say in a second, but it's not traditionally what the bookstore does. So it's really cool to start thinking outside the box and outside the four walls and how you impact that. And I think Andy was going to build on that.
Well, I was just going to go back and ask, you kind of mentioned some of the data that you're looking at. I was just kind of curious, what are the data points you're looking at? I know that the industry overall is looking at-risk behavior, and it's kind of coming out of other places to build more dynamic models. So like in food services, we're seeing missed meals. So students that aren't going to the cafeteria and using their meal plan, that would be a red flag. What is it coming out of the bookstores? What data can you supply to this model that I think is an overall model that these universities are trying to build towards?
Yeah. And to be clear, it's not the bookstore data, right? It's data that's actually lives within one of our partners' Vital Source, that the data that's happening there, and it's happening through the LMS. So in reality, the LMS admins probably can also pull this too. But again, did they ever, is it a part of their thought processes, or is it part of their workflow? It's not. And just as Mike said, it's not part of the bookstores either. It just occurred to us that it's there. And so we are putting it into and that's where I was bringing in, the associate vice chancellor we were talking about is saying, this is student success is your job, your role. I don't know if this can help, but it's here. So you tell us how it can help. And then we can start figuring out what to look for. And so when we start thinking about the types of data, it's going to be different for everybody, right? It's going to be, in some cases, it might be, again, time, engagement in the book itself. It might be how often is a student doing a quiz before they submit it. And then part of that also is, does that data even exist from one publisher to another? Each of them have constructed their courseware products differently. So some may only be looking at things like, is something a pass fail, or is something, we can track that the student went into the platform X amount of times and that they submitted it, but we don't know that they actually tried this quiz 3 times. We just know that they entered into the platform 3 times. And so there's a lot of that's kind of different. I think the big thing about it is to say, when we look at the data across the board, are there any indicators that say, hey, students who are doing well are doing this? Again, is it time in the space? Is it how often that they're interacting with it? Is it that they're highlighting things within their books? Is it, again, this is data that's now kind of there that we never had before. And so I think that's kind of what we're looking at and trying to figure out what are those KPIs? And then we can kind of figure out what to do with it from that perspective.
Yeah, I think we're kind of on this precipice of where we're going to really have some really interesting stuff coming out of this space. And the fact that UC Davis is working on it, considering where you guys have been as far as a leader in our industry, is just kind of exciting to me to hear that you guys are working in this space. So I'm looking forward to what We're looking 6 months. You're going to be presenting at some of the conferences on this. Real
I
excited
mean,
for that. Can I
yeah, I
push you
mean,
for that?
we've already kind of started talking about it at a couple of different conferences. And but again, it's more of, okay, we're in this introductory stage of trying to figure it out. We will do something pilot probably in the spring so that we would have some sort of data in the fall. So remember that we are a quarter school. So for us right now, where most semester schools are in their spring semester, we're in our winter quarter. So we still have one other quarter that's going to happen starting in April. And so, we'll do something very small, but something that we can see, like, does this work? Let's test this thing and see what we can kind of get out of that. And again, we will course correct. We always will. We have to. And so we're not going into this saying, well, this is how we're going to do it, and this is the way it's going to be, and this is the right way. It's going to be, let's try it. Let's see what comes out of it. If it doesn't give us what we think we need, then okay, we course correct and we figure something else out. And we alter what we're looking for, or we go back to the drawing board in terms of what data we're asking for. Or maybe it's more of, did we ask the right question to start with? Right? Did we get the right KPI put in there for us to be measuring this? But again, that's also not my space to make that decision, right? It's
Yeah.
like, I had an analysis.
But what you've done, though, and what the UC Davis stores continues to do is to think differently, right? Where every store is kind of facing the same challenges, same questions. Every campus is facing the same challenges, same questions, but you're asking different questions, or you're uncovering things that have within the last 5 years have been, the data's been there. We just we didn't know to look, right? The bookstore didn't know to look. The bookstore didn't know what was potentially available. But that builds on the larger thing for me when it comes to you and your teams, is that you're thinking holistically about the difference and the impact that you can make. It's the bookstore has the ability to impact student success in student access. One of the things that Andy and I talk a lot about, and some of the research that we're working on, is we're looking at access constructs within higher education and how they are a multiplier, or how they impact motivation. Even the most motivated student can be crushed by the weight of an access construct like textbooks or housing, food insecurity. So all of these things can negatively impact even the strongest student. It can absolutely dampen their motivation to a point where they're not going to be as successful as they could have been if these access constructs had been removed. Thinking along that lines, one of the things that we talked about before we got on the episode was your C-store, your convenience store, the role that is actually playing on campus, because I think you've uncovered something that I'm only aware of maybe a handful of schools that have even remotely touched this. But can you talk about the role of your convenience store on campus, or the role of your convenience store in student access? Because it's not just a convenience store, it's something much bigger than that.
Sure. Yeah. And, you kind of alluded to this, and it's basically that when we start thinking about what we can do as a store, or what our kind of role is, we look at it from the perspective of, well, what are the goals of the institution? We talked about, it's retention, it's time to completion, it's graduation rates. If that's what's important to our institution, which we know it is, then where do we fit within that realm? And how can we support that space? That's what we kind of think about. And then we start to dig into the little nitty-gritties of what that means for the store. And so to your question is, what role does the store and the C-store play? So we accept SNAP, which is, for those that don't know, SNAP, and then we call it CalFresh, but ultimately food stamps. The person has never been in there. That's what it is. We accept that as a tender, and we know it's important. We have literally right next door to us is the Basic Needs Center. So there's somebody there who can help students navigate the process to receive these types of benefits, and then they can utilize them there in the store. So why is that important? Well, we'll get into the numbers in a few minutes. But ultimately, again, going back to kind of a real life story, because that's what's important here is, so we had the vice president of student affairs come from our home office. So the UC system, there are 10 campuses, and then we have what we call the office of the president, which is kind of the overseeing of each of the campuses. So we don't have presidents, we have chancellors. At the office of the president, they're called they're president. So a VP from the office of the president of student affairs came and did a tour of Davis. And so they went and saw the tutoring center, they saw the stores, they saw campus recreation, they went through and saw all the different spaces which we have. And so we thought it would be a good idea for when they came to visit the stores that we would allow our student managers to do the tour themselves. And so when you came into the C store, or our markets, we had our student lead, his name is Jonathan, do the kind of tour around the store and what it does. And so Snap came up and he told a story which was basically this. He's like, I am so happy that we accept Snap here now, because I use it, and before we were able to do so, me and my friends would come to the MU, which is the Memorial Union, which is where the store is. And that's also where there's a food service location. He goes, me and my friends would come and they would all go get their lunch. And then we would go and sit in the quad and they would eat and I would just sit there because I couldn't afford to buy it. He goes, that felt horrible. I didn't like the feeling of not being able to do that. He goes, now that we have Snap, I can come in and grab my sandwich. They can go grab their whatever they're going to, their pizza or whatever they're going to grab. I can grab my food, my drinks, whatever. I can meet them in the quad and I can just be there with them. And it just occurred to you going, there's kids out there that feel left out, are embarrassed for something they have no control over. And so this is what kind of led us to say, oh my God, this is important. Interestingly enough, as I was kind of thinking about this, our conversation, I started going back through and looking at some old emails. And this kind of gets us into the numbers piece of that puzzle. Is there was a conversation between the manager of the market and the IT manager. And I was glancing through old emails and I was like, that was really interesting. Her name is Kathy. So Kathy reaches out to our IT manager and says, hey, my leads are telling me that we have a problem around lunchtime every day. The lines keep getting backed up because we only have one EBT terminal. Can we get another one? And then there was the conversation that was, okay, yeah, we can, but it's going to cost this much money and da, 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 da. But what that told me is there's a need for this. If we're getting a line because this is what students are using, then we need more of them. And so, yes, they have more, and now we have 4 registers, and there's 4 ways to process that now.
So does that mean that like a significant portion, like you'd feel like based on the lines and needing more equipment, does that mean that your C store is mostly Snap or EBT, or does it make up a large percentage of the total sales per term or for the year?
It does. So that particular store does just over $1 million.
The C store does $1 million.
Yeah, just over $1 million. 35 to 40% of it is EBT. So $350,000 to $400,000 a year is EBT transactions, which means those students would not eat if we did not accept it.
That's incredible. That is mind blowing that there was that much of a hidden population until you provided that service, and they could just reducing that stigma and providing an opportunity. Food. We're talking about food, which is more basic than course materials in higher education.
Absolutely.
And just the fact that we were opened that door and we didn't know that they were there. That is, for the bookstore to have that type of impact in the community is incredible. Like, it's just absolutely incredible how transformational that must have been for the thousands of students that we didn't know needed us
right
there.
And over time now, there are other, we have our partners in housing and dining that have figured out their ways to supply that as well. But it was a need. And, we knew it kind of was a need, which is why we started it. And then we realized, oh crap, this is a much bigger need than we actually thought. So, and again, that's where kind of conversation with the manager and the IT person came in. And it's like, okay, if we're getting lines because this is what's needed, then it's a simple fix, get more terminals. But ultimately, yeah, that's where we're at.
So you mentioned housing and dining. How do they fit into this picture? And are you guys in the same silos, or it's probably a bad term, but reporting up to the same people? Or what is your relationship with those departments, and how do they fit into this whole food access at UC Davis?
Absolutely. So we are all within student affairs. So yes, we all do report up the same line. So that's always beneficial, right? That always makes collaboration a little bit easier. And so there are a couple things. I think the biggest piece is what we call Aggie Cash, which is the student dining dollars. We would say, and so again, let's step back for a second and say on our campus, there's a handful of C stores and eating areas and so forth. The stores runs to the one in the Memorial Union, which is again, where the main store is and our convenience store, and then one in what we call the ARC, which is, for lack of a better term, the gym. So there's the convenience store in the gym, and there's a convenience store in the MU. And then there's a handful around each of the housing complexes. So the housing complexes, each dorm is its own kind of like little community. And within there's some C stores that support those areas. Well, when someone comes in and buys lives in the dorms and has a food plan, then they have what's called Aggie Cash, depending on their food plan, X amount of dollars that can be spent. Well, we would get questions all the time because for such a long period of time, we have our own point of sale system. They have their own point of sale system. And so students would come into the store and be like, well, I want to buy this with Aggie Cash. We're like, actually, sorry, we can't. And they're like, but they told me we could buy food with this. And we're like, well, that is true, just not here. So then that happened often enough that we're like, okay, there's got to be a way for us to make this work. So again, working with them and saying, okay, well, how does your system work? How do our systems work? What can we do? And we came to kind of a agreement conclusion of like, okay, we'll give you an iPad that is connected to the dining system. So at least when the student is using this, it's deducting their dollars. You at the point of sale side, what we decided is we would ring it up as ring up the item, and then we have a tender that says Aggie Cash. Obviously, we're not really putting cash into our tender, but at the end of each month, I send them a report and say, this is what we show that was purchased with Aggie Cash. They come back and say, well, this is what we show that was had gone through the iPad that you sent. And then they transfer us the money.
So it's like an AR account, right? So you're essentially creating like an AR account.
Ultimately, that's it. And then we're billing dining. But ultimately, that's how we kind of came to that conclusion. Saying, okay, now there is a way for us to do this. Is it going to be a couple of steps? Is it ideal? Would it be better if we could just swipe the card? And absolutely. But we didn't say, well, we can't do it that way, so no, we're not going to. It's, well, there is a way. We just have to figure out what it is. And again, is it going to be a step or two more? Sure. Eventually, would we like to figure out a way? Absolutely. Is it top priority? No, it's working now, so let's continue as is. And at some point in time, if ever there's a programmer that has some time to do something, maybe we'll have that conversation. But for now, it works.
And what's really interesting, and Andy, I was going to ask you this part of the conversation, with understanding what you do on your campus and the tie-in you have to a lot of the things that Aaron's talking about. Can you see something of this working on your campus, or like, can you see this type of partnership essentially being able to be done anywhere on campus, like any campus across the country?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think it's something that should be strived for, but it does come down to how is food services working with other programs on campus. I think it works. There's the potential for these programs to work a lot better with independent stores and self-operated food services. And I'm not sure if that's the case at UC Davis or if you guys are working with a contractor for your food services. I believe you guys are self-op, if I'm not mistaken. That makes it a lot easier when you begin getting contractors involved. There's this aspect of missed meal factors that, they're able to lower the costs to students with that. It's a really complex thing. And that just, kind of when I was hearing Aaron talk about it, I was like, they're doing what's right and they're doing it well. It's a testament to what Aaron's team is doing that, that they were able to come up with that solution. So,
Well, to be conscious of your times, I'm going to move forward with kind of the last question. Aaron, again, dude, unbelievable. Like, absolutely continue to be amazed. I continue to just be blown away by the way that you and your team think, or the way that you think, or the sponsorship or support you get from your executive director and your vice chancellor. It's awesome. Like, it really is. Like, I don't know how else to put it. The stories that you're telling, they're everywhere. But to share them and to make them powerful and to take those stories and find a way to turn them into something incredible. whether it's course materials, food access, whatever, the innovation and the 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 way that you think, right? The level at which you think about this stuff is awesome. Like it's truly, again, I talk about this all the time when it comes to course materials. As we help people with course materials and access programs, we have potential impact an infinite number of people. We will never, if you're running a store and you have a course materials program or an access program, you will never truly understand the lives that you potentially changed by simply providing access to course materials and what that means for their academic journey, choosing the major that they want to choose, lowering the structural barriers or dismantling the structural access barriers. But you're doing that in multiple places. I mean, you're doing it in ways that I never thought of. It never crossed my mind. I don't have any experience there. And probably a lot of the people that we will connect with in this podcast haven't thought about it that way, or don't know that they can make that difference. So it's absolutely amazing. So kudos are enough. Like, legitimately, this is unbelievable. Like, absolutely unbelievable.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that.
It's crazy. I'm in shock. I'm in awe. Like, I seriously, the stories that you tell today, like, I kind of like got like a little tear, like right in my eye there for a second. Then I realized I couldn't cry on camera
Well,
because
why
I think
not?
about my kids. I mean, I could, I guess. It'd feel weird, but I'd never live it down if I did that.
I
But
would not let you
now
live
that
it down.
now that I have my own kids and they're young, right, and they're little, the stories that you tell and positioning the work that you do around your own kids, just you, it's just a different way to think. And this conversation has been really important to me because I think it can help me change the way that I think and continue to realize how impactful the work that I do, the work that Andy does, the work that you do, the work that the thousands of directors and managers across the US, in campus retail, they all have that same opportunity, and they can all do that same thing, and they can continue to change lives for our students.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it really changes your mindset when you begin thinking about, okay, Izzy is going to go to this school. How do I make it the greatest school for them to go to when she makes it there in, I don't know how old she is, 5, 10, 15 years.
She's 14 now, so
So 14. So what, we're
so
looking
not
at
too
4
far away.
years. Still, she's at UC Davis, wherever she ends up going. But when you begin getting into that mindset of, okay, I'm really doing something that's going to benefit. And it's not just my kid, but when you can see, okay, my kid's going here or potentially will go here. How do I want the best experience for them? It kind of does change your mindset on things.
Absolutely. It was the single most impactful thing for me to recognize that although it was self-serving from that perspective, right? I mean, thinking about my own kid, it was the transition of, wait, everybody else is somebody's kid. And so why should they get any less than what I want to do for mine? So I think that was and again, it was not my intent 20 years ago. So
Right.
So maybe one last question before we wrap things up today. Okay, we're getting farther into our careers, not close to the end yet, at least from what I know. But what are the things that you want to get done before you ride off into the sunset?
I worry about this current generation. Again, thinking about my own kid, potential, I don't want to say inability because that's not right, but I'm going to use that term to make a genuine connection. They tend to spend a lot of time on their phones, which I do too. I'm not blaming the phone, but I do see that this generation of students that I currently have, and again, my daughter coming into this space, seem to struggle in that area. So I think for me, one of the big things is going to be figuring out how to have a conversation with them about, even within the four walls of this institution, it's almost like a fairy tale world. It's not true. Once you leave here, life is very different, and get them prepared for that. I worry that they will not be able to have that piece. So for me, I think what would I like to do moving, before I move into the sunset would be, you know, developing some sort of plan or some sort of trainings that can then can support students in this space. How do you become a little more, you know, again, not empathetic per se, but how do you understand that the customer who's angry in front of you is not angry at you? They're angry at a situation that they're in. And so not to take that personally and not to take it to heart, to learn how to, if you need to engage in a conversation that may be uncomfortable with a roommate or a coworker, how do you have that conversation and still be, still come out of it okay on the other side? I think that is my bigger worry for them. And so I would like to kind of focus a little bit on that and figure out what that may look like. Would I love to solve the housing crisis and the food insecurity crises and all those? Are they aspirational? Absolutely. And then when I think about those things, I start to think about, okay, well, how, right? And then it's, well, one piece at a time, one piece at a time. Because if I think about it too much, too big, it becomes too overwhelming and it
Right.
becomes too much.
Right.
So how do we do this piece at a time, piece at a time, piece at a time? But yeah, I think that the biggest thing is to ensure that when the students leave us, that they are prepared for what's actually out there, not prepared for what we have here. And what that may mean is, unfortunately, sometimes being a little sterner at times, maybe ensuring that they understand that, hey, you know what, you calling in sick last minute or you deciding that you can't show up because you have to study for a final, it affects your coworkers. And this is how it affects them. I understand that you're worried about your mental health and that's important. Absolutely, it's important. But please know that your actions cause others to have the same anxiety as well. And getting them just to understand that.
So Mike started to say when we started the conversation that he was a fanboy of you. I think after this conversation, I've kind of become a fanboy too. I really like all the stuff that you're doing at UC Davis. It's kind of a really amazing. So I really appreciate having this conversation today. And I'm just so excited to see what UC Davis will be doing in the next 1 to 5 years. I think it's going to be pretty amazing. So definitely going to be on my radar from going forward.
And Aaron, thank you so much for being here today. The conversation didn't go where I had planned it to go, but it went in a place that I think is what some of our colleagues in the industry need to hear. They need to understand that they can make a difference, and it's just figuring out what they can do and how they can do it. What resources are available and the power that they have, the ability that they have to make changes for the better on their campus community. I am not wrong. UC Davis stores continues to be legends and pioneers in collegiate retail, and your stories today prove that. Thank you so, so much for being here, and echoing Andy, I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you both. I really enjoyed the time today. I appreciate you inviting me onto the show.
I will see you later. Thank you so much, Aaron.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Textbook. If something you heard today stays with you, take it back to your own campus and feel free to share it with a colleague or friend. We'll see you next time.